Hi, this is Mike Torsha, and welcome to another episode of Live Well and Thrive. I have a very special guest. His name is Noah Cleckner.
Yes. Hi, how are you, Mike?
Pleasure to meet you. So, do you prefer Noah? How do you
Noah's great. I was called Cleck, short for Cleckner, when I was growing up, so all my friends call me Cleck. So if you want to call me Cleck, you can call me Cleck. If you want to call me Noah, I'm perfectly happy with Noah.
Well, my family, it's always like Mikey, Frankie Boy,
Yeah.
Sammy, so it's like Mikey.
Yep, Mikey.
It's fondness,
Right.
But when you were working in the White House, because you were a White House intern and
Correct.
intern at the Capitol Hill, correct?
Yes, I did. I did both. In 2020, I interned in the National Economic Council at the White House. And then in 2021, when the administrations changed, I hopped over to Capitol Hill and worked for a congresswoman.
So when you worked there,
Yeah.
did you have a nickname?
Cleck. Everyone called me
okay.
Cleck. Yeah, everybody called me Cleck. Even some of the president's staff would refer to me as just Cleck because it was
But that's kind of
easier.
cool, though.
It is. It's like a good brand. I really need to coin it more often.
You should.
Yeah, for sure.
Podcast by Cleck.
Exactly.
Learn all the secrets of
We're going to launch
DC,
it.
right?
All the secrets. Exactly.
Talking about secrets. Well, now, I've been reading so many articles
Okay.
that Washington, D.C. supposedly in this one article I read, is more of a wild sex crave town than Hollywood could ever be.
That's pretty close. It's both in competition, I would say.
I mean, the sex clubs,
right.
There
is a level of degeneracy in Washington, I think, that anybody who spends just a little bit of time in will see it firsthand. There's plenty of congressional stories I've heard with other people that have been involved in things that they shouldn't have been involved in. And, they feel almost pressured to do it because the stakes are high in Washington. They're constantly working around the clock. And it's like everybody knows everybody in that town. So, yeah, there's definitely a presence of misbehavior over in that town for sure.
Yeah, because we talk about Weinstein and
right.
Bill Cosby and all these crazy things. Now, this Sean Combs thing.
No.
But what people don't realize, there's even crazier shit going on,
way crazier,
or equally, in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Because you must figure they're under a lot of stress.
Right.
And like you say, they have these young interns.
Well, that's just it. And I won't say specifically who, but I do remember going to a party one time, and it was after work, and it was on the Hill, and there were, female interns being, inappropriately, messed with. And it really opens your eyes because you think, wait a minute, this can't be that out in the public. And I think a lot of people are like, no, that's crazy talk. That's conspiracy talk. Just like that, Weinstein stuff, right? Nobody really saw that until it came out. And then once the evidence mounted up, it was undeniable. And that activity happens in Washington. And I just remember seeing them drugs and other things. And I'm like, whoa. But then again, it's like, are you really surprised? Because one, you have a culture that normalizes it. And two, you have very powerful people that feel invincible. And I think that you can see that happening out here too in the industry.
Well, do you think they feel above the law because of the fact
they are. I mean, they in a way, they are above the law because they're the ones who are not only writing the law, but they know the individuals that enforce the law. So that can raise all sorts of ethical questions for sure.
And also, too, if these interns, both male and female, feel like, hey, someday I may want to be in that position or that seat.
Yep.
I better.
Exactly.
Because it happens in the corporate world anyway, right?
Does.
And they discount it, sort of.
I don't know. Have you seen the new HBO series Quiet on Set?
No.
It's a new docudrama series, not even docudrama. It's an actual documentary about several individuals, celebrities who have rose to fame over the years in Nickelodeon, and highly recommend watching it. Just recently released. It's a hit. I mean, everybody's talking about it, and it shows you just the level of not only corruption but just again degeneracy and misbehavior that was done to these young aspiring actors. And to your point about, well, hey, if I want to make it big one day. And usually they're reinforced with this belief from their superiors. So from that director, from that, political figure. And so they do. They would rather be quiet because they know it's a guaranteed paycheck. And not just that, but it could be their future. And so it sounds worth it until it's too late. And I think then once you're involved in that type of activity, it's very difficult to get out.
Well, I think it's basically in so many different industries, because if you look at like the book that I don't forget what her real name is, that played Shirley Temple.
Yes.
Okay. Her mother was taking her to these big studios, and they would meet with the studio head.
Right.
And basically the mother was telling the daughter, I'll be right back, stay outside, and then close the door, and she got the role. I mean, she wrote incredible stories recalling what had happened. And I was disgusted because I always looked up at Shirley Temple as a sweet little girl, and those movies being made by these wonderful producers. But the things that were going on behind the scenes, that poor mom was doing everything she can to get this girl these roles.
Right.
And
well, that's just it. And like as a parent, whether your kid is going into Hollywood or your kid is going into Washington, the parent doesn't want to feel like if they speak up and they speak out against it, their fear is that it would prevent said person, their child, from being able to be successful. And so every parent wants to see their kid successful. Every parent wants their kid to be well off. And so they're supportive in that. And so I think it gets very complicated for the parent in determining like, when do I step in and when do I, but you have to protect your kid. Like,
if I had children, I would do everything I can to help my children advance their career.
Right.
But crossing the line, when it comes to, sexual favors exchange, they need to earn it. They need to get it, because otherwise they're getting that and they're not earning it. It'd be like when I was competing.
They're scarred emotionally, physically for the rest of their life. And, it makes you wonder, like, how many more are there out there that are just, quiet? And at what point do they have the courage to be able to stand up and say, hey, this happened? And until many people do that collectively, I think the degeneracy continues to spread.
And also, too, I feel once they cross that line,
right,
it affects you mentally, emotionally, physically. And like, I remember when I was competing years ago in bodybuilding, and I showed up at a show, and there was all these other classes, but the one class I was in, there was no competitors. So the promoter said, hey, you won. I go, well, I don't want to win. I want to compete in the other divisions, which I could, because I said, I don't want to do that, because otherwise I'm not really earning it. I just showed up. I trained too hard to just show up and get a trophy. So for me, there was no value to it.
Right.
So I started that mental attitude that I worked my ass off. I won this because I deserved it. I was the best athlete that day on the stage at that time. So I would feel if I had children, I want them to earn it.
Yeah.
Because when you earn it,
it's different.
Yeah.
It's completely different. You're not being handed something. You're actually, your hard work, your talent that took time to gain, to acquire, it pays off dividends, and you mature through that process, and it makes you want to go further. It's the same thing with me. Like, once the White House internship was under my belt, it was, what's next? I want to earn something bigger. I want to keep going up. And so you do.
So now
there's competition. There's never,
I'm sure there's
never
right?
not competition. Yeah.
So what do you think it takes to succeed in Washington? Because we see certain people climb. Now, do you think a lot of it is because they have a very charismatic personality and people take a very strong liking to them? Or what do you think really is a secret sauce for someone to succeed? Because you're doing it now. You're going up the ladder, and you're probably going to be out in Washington pretty soon.
Yep.
Right? So
maybe back and forth.
Right, whatever. But what would you say if you give advice to another young man or woman if they want to pursue a career in politics what does it take?
I think first thing is you have to establish what your end goal is, especially in Washington, because there's so many facets of the U.S. government. You know, you could go get an agency job, ride that out, and be very successful, make six figures at the end of it. You could become an elected official. At that point, you're playing the game at all times, or you know, there's a lot of people that work in Washington that do it for the endless benefits that the government can give you, healthcare benefits, retirement benefits. So you have to establish first, like, what's your end goal? And secondly, you have to establish what are your limits? Are you comfortable being in uncomfortable situations in the back room when a deal is going down at 2 a.m? And, you know, do you want to be a part of that? Or are you focused on improving the lives of other people, improving the lives of your constituents if you are an elected official? And I think a lot of people go into Washington with a very optimistic mindset of, oh, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to do this. It's not necessarily about changing the world. We have to change first. We have to change ourselves. But then secondly, we should focus on just what is within our control. So like what I would say to someone who's young is first establish, where do you see yourself? It's cliche, but where do you seriously see yourself in 20 years in Washington? What level, what rank do you want to be at? And then what are you willing to do to get there? If you work hard, if you stay focused, if you stay away from all the temptations, because, you know, as a young person, you go to DC, you've got the nightlife, the bars, I mean, some of the, you know, most beautiful places that you can go to enjoy a social hour is in Washington. There's so much history there. And so it's easy to get wrapped up in all of that lifestyle aspect of DC. But setting those goals and those limitations is going to set you up for a lot more success.
Well, so right there, you just brought up something in my mind.
Yeah.
What happens? You're working with a group of very powerful politicians, and they say, let's go out for drinks. Do you think that's a good thing to do?
Yeah, sure, of course.
So there's no problem with that.
That's business, right?
Okay.
And like that happens all the time. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go and do those things, because you can't just assume that every time someone offers you something, it's bad, or that there's always going to be strings attached.
But do maybe limit it, though, because after a while, then you end up being a drinking buddy and not an employee.
Exactly.
And there's a different bond there,
Exactly.
you know, and that's what I would think.
For me, like, I'll tell you this, for me, I had, you know, a lot of friends when I was in DC, people hire, you know, senior level staff that wanted to go out, grab drinks afterwards. I read the room. I think, you know, in Washington, being a fly on the wall isn't, like, really, it could be a strong asset for someone. You don't always have to, you don't want to be the one in the room, right, that knows everything. And you also don't want to show your sort of political cards, so to speak, to the people you're dealing business with right away. Like, you want to read the room. You want to establish trust between you and the person you're doing that business deal with. And if it at any point feels like you are being used, or that there are strings attached to it, in that moment, you have to de-escalate in the conversation when you're ready. And then in a couple days, come back and say, hey, listen, this deal's not going to work out, or hey, I'm not going to be doing this. And you may lose opportunities. Sure, that happens, you know, all the time. But yeah.
Did you ever have someone that you work with that you saw it was crossing the line to more personal interest?
Yeah, for sure.
And what did you do to derail it?
For me personally, I don't partake in that stuff. So I don't, what I did was I completely just stopped contacting them after a while. Right. When I started to realize what they were wanting out of me and what they were wanting out of the situation. And so, yeah, you have to play your poker face in that world. There's a poker face.
It's like walking on eggshells, huh?
It is, and I think that contributes to a lot of the problems in Washington, a lot of the paranoia. You know, to me, it's that there's a lot of fixing that needs to happen in that town, but not just with the people, but also with what is socially accepted there.
Now, how do you feel?
And I love Washington, D.C., by the way. It's like one of my favorite
That's what I asked you. How do you, I mean, you really love what you do, right?
I do, 100%.
So do you want to be president, or what do you want? Do you want to be a senator? You said you got to figure that out when you walk in. So
I mean,
what's your goal?
I feel like if you run for president, it's like a death warrant from the, but you know, like I would not, I don't know if I would want to run for president, but I think being the individual that is the mover and shaker behind other politicians, I think a role of that nature is a lot more influential. You can get a lot more done
More like a senator, congressman?
I mean, I've considered it all. Congress member, I think there's a lot of money to be made in lobbying. But then at that point, you are just lobbying for that specific group or issue. And so even that I'm hesitant with because, there's just a lot of money to be made there. And then this is why the public has such a low trust in our government, because it's all, self-driven. They not just self-driven, but it's greed. A lot of it's greed and power.
Now, I watch in the news where people that are Democrats and people that are Republicans at each other's throat.
Oh, very much so.
So is it like that real life in Washington?
No.
So when they say the Republicans are out at a bar,
then they're all clinking this. They're all clinking. Yes, right? For the most part, I think a lot of Republican, whether you're a staffer or an elected member, yes, it's the good old boys club, so to speak. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican at the end of the day.
So let me say, for instance, you're out with the staffers, and everybody is like Republican.
Yeah,
but then all of a sudden, the staffers from the Democrats come in. You just kind of put it away in Switzerland, everybody's cool, or do you feel there's still a little tension amongst you?
I mean, I think there always will be an underlying tension just because the agendas of both parties are polar opposite, and especially the world we live in today, it's so divided, politically speaking. But when they're in that room, chances are, a couple other people in my Republican group, we're just at a club with the Democratic staffers. Last weekend. So, I mean, it is, that mindset is there. Like, politics is put aside because money is of interest to them, power is of interest to them, and advancing whatever agenda it is.
So getting along with everybody is sort of like the best thing to do.
Yeah. I think the media perpetuates a lot of the division too. I think they and sort of provoke that out of people. So
I hate to see all the anger between everybody.
Well, I do too. I'm a registered independent. I'm not a registered Republican. I'm not a registered Democrat. Never have, probably never will be, because I am just completely, I don't want to say disillusioned by both parties, but I look at both parties as two wings of the same bird, and we have such polarizing figures leading both parties right now that a change is going to have to come. Something's going to have to reset in that sense, because the more and more extreme you become, the less stable the country is. And the goal is to find common ground. We're not going to agree on everything all the time. I have a lot of Republican friends and Democrat friends that I don't agree with on everything. And they're like, how can you believe in this or that? And I'm like, because nothing is ever black and white, especially political issues. Yeah. I mean, that's a sensitive topic as it is. So yeah, I think finding that common ground, having discussions, that's the other thing. When we stop having discourse with one another, we allow the extremes on both sides to pull further away, to pull this country further apart. And we have to do everything in our ability to bring civil discourse back to the table.
Now, being in the position you are,
yeah,
and you've been observing our current president,
mm-hmm.
What do you feel about his, I'd say, mental state of mind from your observation? Because Fabio is a very dear friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And he always sends me these videos of Biden constantly falling down, going up the stairs to Air Force One, tripping and falling all the time, and then being lost, and they point him in the direction. Do you think there's some issues there with
100%.
His mind? Because I'm concerned.
Yeah. I think everybody should be concerned. I mean, no one wants a president that can't walk properly or speak fluently. No one wants that. It doesn't matter what side. And I think that the Democrats just happen to have that candidate in their party that is, the front runner, that is the current existing incumbent, the president. So they're going to rock and roll with it. But I think that is a dangerous decision. I personally, I've held the belief that if the Democrats were looking longer term, the idea would be this would be the time to replace him. But I think it's set in stone between our current president and the former president. I have a lot of concerns with the mental state that he is in, because let's be honest, like, would you want, say, your late 70-year-old, great-grandfather or grandfather to be running the country, if that was the condition he was in, if your parents were in that condition, would you want them to run? The answer is obviously no. But I think a lot of people on the left say, the alternative is Trump and anything but Trump.
Right.
And the question is, how much of that is, stimulated from the media? How much of that is provoked by the media over the last 6 to 7 years? Probably a lot, Not saying that Trump is a perfect guy. He is not a perfect guy. But if these are the two candidates come November on the ballot, you have to look at the economy where we're at right now. Look where inflation is. Look where crime is at. You go to West Hollywood, you go anywhere here, really cool towns, really sad to see that homeless people are everywhere, not to mention what's going on at the southern border. So my thing is I actually think that the Biden camp, if you don't mind me getting into this, the Biden camp, I think they're ready to roll him all the way through the election. And a lot of that, they're going to be dependent on the amount of illegal immigrants that are coming through the border right now. We're getting, I could be wrong on this number, so someone will have to fact check me, but I think we're getting between 5,000 to 7,000 illegal entry attempts per day, is what Border Patrol told me. Now, again, that number may be not exactly correct, but if it's anything close to that, you run the numbers, you don't have to be a mathematician to know that that's not sustainable after a long period of time for our country, for the, the safety and well-being of those communities in Southern California and, Texas, parts of Texas. They're being overrun. I see videos of farmers saying, this has got to stop. We have this, they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing down there, and they're taking advantage of our system. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that, with observing that. But because we're so polarized, half your audience is going to hate me for that, and half your audience is going to love me for saying that.
Well, but do you think the wall would have helped?
I definitely do.
Okay.
Listen. China
I know
has
people
a wall.
against it, but
yeah, China has a wall. Look at almost every other second and third world, first world country. Almost every country has a wall. Historically speaking, we've had walls. And now all of a sudden, and I think, again, it's Trump. If Trump wasn't the one pushing that, I actually think most Americans would be like, hey, do whatever we got to do to stop the drugs from pouring in. You have fentanyl coming in through at insane rates, and you see innocent people in communities dying left and right because no one wants that. Let's be real. Let's have a real honest conversation. Nobody wants those things. I do think the wall would help. I don't think that's the only solution, though. I do think you need to improve other things like, using technology that we have today at our disposal, drone capabilities. Put all that technology down there. Why wouldn't we want that too?
Yeah.
We want both. And I think
but why isn't Biden doing anything about it?
Because I think that it's pretty much going to guarantee him re-election. I think I say that, but I genuinely think there's no other reason to not. He is the president of the United States. Say what you will about Trump, but Trump hasn't been in office for 4 years almost. So he's not at the helm of making decisions. He's not, able to sign executive orders. A lot of things can be done by the president that aren't being done right now. But I think that there's I don't think there's an advantage for him to do that. And I think for the right, they're going to want to really focus in on that and really stress that this is an issue, which I think it is. But both sides are going to play to their bases on this issue.
Okay, so now that we both sort of agree about Biden's mental capacity, kind of questionable, who do you think's behind the curtain? Like the Wizard of Oz?
Of course.
Okay. Who do you think is behind there? Is it advisors? Is it Obama? Is it Clinton?
Well, I think on the surface level, it's obviously his administration. It's his appointed officials, cabinet members that are making these decisions, that are forming these policies. So it's not Biden, really, to be honest with you. I think Biden has proven that he's playing the role of president because he is the president, but he's not making the executive decisions.
Well,
now, behind that, I will say, you do have a statement that is out there from former President Obama a couple years ago, maybe it was 6-7 years ago, where he said, if I could have a third term, I would sit in my basement and basically put an earpiece, and I'm paraphrasing that part, and call the shots. So do I think, and he was just spotted in the UK, near Parliament, so Of course, right? Of course, these guys are helping Biden get through this presidency. They're making a lot of the negotiations behind the scenes. Do I think that I do think the Democrats, I mean, if they're smart here this election cycle, I think they will replace Biden by the end.
I hope they do. Well, here's another thing that's come up. Several people told me, watch when you see footage of President Biden, that they actually have doubles of Biden. And you could tell because the ears are different. If you look at now, I don't know, is that a conspiracy
Do people
theory?
change? Do people evolve? I mean, I don't know. That's a little bit of a stretch.
Do you know of any presidents that had doubles that they had to use?
No, I'm not familiar. I mean, but that wasn't above. Might be above my pay grade. But I think they're harmless. Those are like harmless conspiracies, but they can evolve and become problematic. I mean, it's possible, I guess. I mean, we've seen so many crazy things in this world that anything is possible, but I don't think so. Personally, that's just my opinion. We need to probably get him out, though.
Yeah, well, I was really concerned for his health.
Yes.
When he did the State of the Union address.
Oh.
It looked like someone shot him up with amphetamines.
Oh, yeah.
He was so amped. I never saw him amped like that, like he just hit a blow, seriously.
Right.
And I was like, wow, they really want to get this guy high energy on camera, but he could have a heart attack. He could have a stroke in front of all of the world.
Right.
And I thought that was a very dumb thing to do.
Yeah.
If he's not capable of doing it.
Well, he definitely wasn't his normal self in that speech. I mean, half the speech was yelling. But even if you don't want to say, okay, that was yelling.
His eyes look weird.
Of course.
Dilated pupils. Listen, when a cop pulls a guy over who's a DUI, they see the pupils. I have a 83-inch Samsung 4K TV, and I was right there, and I go, his pupils look dilated, like he's on some shit.
Right.
And I go, do we want this man to run our country? So that's my concern, is that his mental capability is showing that it's not the quality of a president should be.
You look at all the polls that CNN and NBC News and Rasmussen, you look at all these polls that are coming out, they all have Trump beating Biden by substantial margins as of right now. I think Trump would have to really do something bad, I mean, for those numbers to tank, just because Biden isn't going to improve the economy or inflation, the border. I mean, unless it's a last-ditching effort, I wouldn't anticipate him fixing those problems. And those don't happen overnight either. I mean, there's a lot of planning that goes into that, a lot of resources and manpower that has to go into fixing a lot of these things. And this takes months, I mean, to really fix the damage that has been done. It's going to take years.
Well, my main thing is, I know Biden means well.
Right.
And I'm not against him. Right. I'm concerned for the man's health.
Same.
Mentally, physically, and emotionally.
100%.
I'm scared that something's going to happen. You know how traumatic they would be to see him have a stroke while he's speaking? I just think they got to think, what's more important?
Yeah.
Propping him up and amping him up, or making sure that he doesn't die in front of all of the world. Right. But I know that I'm concerned because what options do we have?
Right, true. I mean, I think that if they pulled him down, and I really think the Biden administration doesn't want that. I think the Democratic Party has a different sort of desire in this presidential race than the Biden team. That's my observation. I think the Biden administration wants Biden to stay in. They want to stand on their record, but I think the Democratic Party, from what I've heard and what I've observed, they are utilizing their resources in media to try to push and pressure him out. You see that with the poll numbers. I mean, let's be honest. Would the media, say what you will again about Trump, but would the media give Trump favorable numbers unless they felt that, okay, genuinely Biden is not right now beating Trump and we need to pressure his team to
find a replacement that would be a good runner, correct?
I do think, if not this time, 100% in 2028, Gavin Newsom will be the nominee for the Democratic Party. And I mean, I think you got to remember he's related to Nancy Pelosi. She has this vision of having him serve in that capacity down the road. And I think that if something were to happen to Biden between now and November, he's their pick. I know people have thrown around Michelle Obama and a few other names. I don't see that happening, but I do. I think that a lot of people don't know the condition California is in around the world. Other Democrats and other Republicans and independents, they don't get a firsthand look at what Newsom has done to this place. But Newsom is sharp. He's sharp. He's well spoken. You got to watch out for him. That's who I think.
Well, he does look like a politician, but from what he did during COVID,
right? Do you think that would deter a lot of people? I would think.
Listen, he did a lot of things where he locked us down. We couldn't go out to dinner. He's having these dinner parties at these restaurants. He felt above the law. He should have been like everybody else. If you're going to make us be locked down, you better be locked down with you and your family, just like we are. But he didn't. He was out there. I mean,
my governor in Florida at the time was doing the exact opposite.
I mean, his wife was going to get her hair done secretly,
Right.
So I just think that he should have been a better role model. And I know that if eventually it will come out when he goes and does the campaign, people might say, well, there is a side of him that he looks like that bright, shining white knight that's going to save our country.
But we know what he's done.
He did cross the line. So, but unfortunately, time is up. But I want to thank you. This was fun, and
I could talk about politics.
We got to talk. I'm sure there'll be more things to talk about.
I want to talk to you about later in another episode. I want to talk to you about my experience traveling abroad. I did a study abroad in South Korea, and I visited Turkmenistan. I really want to tell you about that one time.
I look forward to that.
Of course. Well, thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you for joining us. This is Mike Torsha. Thanking you for watching another fun episode of Live Well and Thrive. And please remember, we need your support. Subscribe. Thank you. That was cool, man.